feels like a mission because it is actually hard work without trying to be like self-righteous or preachy. It really is um, like activism in some way. Okay, like how much did this one gig we did at do you know A4 Arts Foundation on Batenkant? It's now a art institution. Before they refurbished the building, it was basically walls being stripped down, this mass shaft elevator like broken in the middle, wooden floors broken, and they were like, until we renovate it, you guys can use the space. It's free. And I think over 3 days we just put the word out 3 days before, and we hosted some live musicians who were in town. And because it was a new space, yes, so over 100 people came, and we put the word out the day before. There was no cover charge, so we didn't make anything. But the only thing we spent on to do that gig was, I think it was 60 rand for the toilet paper in this really broken down, rundown toilet. And that was I would say spiritually one of the most beautiful gigs we did, because people came, there was music of all kinds, there was gatherings, it was a great space. Some artists were painting on the walls because the buildings was going to be so Datini and Breeze, and then were like all over the walls, Grant as well. And it was the most chilled out atmosphere, and it felt like sincere, but it didn't cost anything to do. And that has always has always been a reminder of, when you think you want to do something and then you stop yourself because you're like, I don't have this, I don't have that. For me, it's like the African innovativeness is really like taking what you have and making it work, and just trying to do it as opposed to like talking about doing it, you know. I think, I mean, in terms of the like the record from the continent, I'm also like, I got so many, and I feel like I should answer better. But okay, I think we did this thing for the National Arts Festival recently. I can talk about that, because that's like, how do you make stuff under this time? For the whole time that we've been existing, we've kind of been like, I think we've felt a little bit like outsiders of the scene, because we never really got like 400 people at a gig, and we're not like the popular choice, the people's choice, or whatever you want to call it. But we still have a following, strangely enough. That's off the record. So the point of all of that is that, having done all of this work, actually so much that you don't even, I mean, you would relate to this, where only when you look back you realize, wow, actually over the years, the amount of things that you've done in this very field of putting on events or work, it actually like really adds up. And unless you write down each one, you don't really take stock of everything that you've learned and done. And one of the things we've never really done before was apply for funding and grants, and to kind of legitimize or take this to the next level of something. But we were approached by a sound artist called James Webb, who was on the music board for the National Arts Festival in Makanda last year, to say like, isn't Future Nostalgia keen on submitting a proposal for the festival? And we spoke about the idea of occupying a house or building, and for like 10 days filling it with music, with art, with documentaries, with books, with education in every form, or art in every form, and just being a place that you could go to and like get sucked into, because that's the kind of dream place that we'd want to like go to, you know what I mean, or like geek out at. But also the fact that I think over the last few years the nightlife in Grahamstown, or for the festival, has kind of died down a bit, besides the jazz. And I've been a few times, so covering it and working there and stuff. So it was kind of interesting to be approached, to ask to send a proposal. And so we sent in something which was initially meant to be finding a space in the city or in the town, and taking a car full of records and setting up turntables and doing workshops and doing stuff in various areas of the city, but just kind of occupying also this one space and doing everything. It's not just playing music for people to dance, doing like various other things. And then it was announced this year, after everything with COVID happened, once our application was successful, we were going to go. We were so excited, and it was announced that the festival will be made virtual. So immediately my gut feeling was like, if it's not the real thing, I'm not like keen to do it. But my partner Grant like encouraged me to not be so narrow-minded and also think about what we can do. What can we do? And we had back and forth process of several proposals, which is also a learning curve in how do you take everything you do and put it on a piece of paper and word it and that kind of thing. And eventually we came down to what ended up happening is instead of doing DJ mixes as they normally would flow from our record collections, we set them up as what we call sonic lectures or just podcasts to simplify it, or actually even simpler radio shows. And that's what we could do easily in the house, just microphone and two turntables and a mixer, and just like try and thread through a narrative of some kind. So we had 8 that we did, and they're actually still up right now. But it's about fitting everything to a digital platform, but it still like requires a lot of patience and listening from somebody who comes from the other side and wants to engage with it. So from the artwork that Grant has made, we made little GIFs that could show, instead of an exhibition in a physical space, it was like limited to a 2-minute video that just like flicked through images of his artwork, which has been things like portraits of jazz figures in South Africa over the years and stuff. So it's just about reshaping what you do to an online format. And what was cool about it is that everything at the festival was had tickets attached to it, besides the fringe stuff. But our stuff was free. So you could actually engage with it. You didn't have to buy a ticket, you can just like check it out. And so for us, I think it was like the first time as a collective that you're doing something beyond just like putting on gigs and playing it. That's pretty much all we've been able to do. But I think it would be really dope to connect with collectives through the continent. Find ways to move through the continent and connect with people who might be doing similar things. I know Mauritius has some really interesting stuff happening, Nairobi as well. It would be cool to see what people are listening to and what they're doing, and if there's anything like this that exists there, and how do we connect with them just to make the connection stronger. So I think, but you obviously need money for that, so that would be one of the focuses, Yeah, so the National Arts Festival thing was kind of like a way to push us in this time of lockdown when very limited opportunities are coming up. Done in a very DIY way, but the money was, the funding was to like just the hours that we put in to do the work. But if we had the resources, we would have hired like crazy cameras and all of these things that you need, recorders and mics. But then you realize you don't need all of that stuff to still do it. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're living in a very difficult time, and people will be forgiving to you if you don't put out the slickest, smoothest, glossiest looking thing. The point is, it was coming from a black perspective. It was looking at the continent and South Africa as well, and it's trying to put all the research that we've done or we talk about to people just in like words so that it exists somewhere. It's the stuff we talk about anyways. It's the stuff that we all talk about. So that's what was cool about it. I think what we learned from it is like, oh, all of a sudden I need to learn how to sound edit. All of a sudden I need to learn how to image edit and video edit. And these are not skills I had a week ago, but now I have to learn very, very quickly how to do it just so that we could work with this medium. But when you're forced to do it, then you just get those skills. It's like, oh, we could have done this the whole time, but we didn't do it. But it's about how to make yourself also as a creative and freelance person like multi-skilled, so you can actually end up doing everything. That's why I said I like this vibe here, is that it's very important to document the figures. Like for me, documentation is everything. Like I geek out and document. How many times have I told you, when are you writing your story or who's writing your story? I told this to Jumbo several times. I tell Alan also this, like you've been around, you've seen things are happening, it's documenting history. And the idea of archive and documentation is important for the now, but it's also important for the future. And why we so like lost with identity in South Africa is because we don't have our archive solidified. We don't know our archive at all. It's all like in people's garages and basements, and needs to be dug out and be strung together. So the documentation of what you guys are doing is very important, because you realize only once you have all of it that it was important. Not now, even while you're doing it. It's only looking back that you can actually, make sense of it. Any one of us in this room could be documenting all these stories all the time, but it takes like, sometimes you're doing it without any money. It takes effort to go out there, and it takes time. But more than time, because I have time, it takes like the will, and the importance of realizing that these stories don't exist yet, because they're not anywhere in print or whatever, in some academic journal in the library. They don't exist really. So the point is to bring them into actualization. Like all of Africa stuff is so oral history, oral passed down, even traditional instruments. So once it's just the academics who are like the ones who are populating the universities that have the official word.
Canonizing.
Canonizing, and I think that's the thing. When I looked into learning about South African history, jazz history, a lot of the books were written by Europeans or people not from here. So you realize like what a great need there is to get those stories, because it's not like it's not here. And this is why, like, I think for me right now, I think things like documentation and creating the archive is even more important than journalism per se, as it is. It's all supposed to be something that someone else can come and do something more with. So this thing about history of venues, I'm super interested in finding either a book or a film about the history of jazz venues in South Africa or in Cape Town, but also the just clubs, just like music clubs that were in different parts of maybe black or brown areas, and how they functioned and who was there and how they managed to get away with it. Nobody else has it. It gets forgotten about, and it's just like, because our film industry and the music industry is so young still, you have like a lot of digging up still to do. Like there's tons of stuff that's sitting, just recordings, live recordings, all of these things. Yeah, and also not realizing that what's important is actually what's in the present moment. It's not like you have to dig into history. That's very, very, very important for us to do it as like cultural activists. But also realizing what's around you is also important. So for instance, like I came across, when doing this National Arts Festival thing, I came across photos and video footage from like gigs from 7 years ago, where there was like a very nice crowd, where people were moving at Future Nostalgia, and I was like, wow, I really didn't document this the way I should have, and I was always there, and I'm a natural documentator. Why didn't I do it? Because, and then I was like, that wasn't really that long ago, but there's something here that doesn't exist now, and there's something there. So this is what I'm saying, is that more and more you learn the importance of going to the figures who were around, who were behind the scenes, like Atiyyah, like these people pushed as much as the central figures also, So I think that this culture of documentation and archiving needs to come from us, as you said, and not like about us from the outside, but like actually from us. And also with that comes the idea of accessibility, like making it accessible to people to learn from. Because what's the point of just sitting with all this stuff? Like you have to make it accessible somehow. So that's the other problem with South Africa, is the gatekeeping that happens, like who accesses great education, who goes to tertiary institutions. Like education has massive gatekeeping on it, so making information accessible is like very important. There's this artist called Nora Chupamire from Zimbabwe, but she's based in New York, and she was doing a residence in Cape Town 2017, and she was working on a performance, and she asked around saying she needs a DJ, and someone recommended me to, two people recommended me to her, and I met her just because there was really nothing happening in my life. I wasn't working, I wasn't even freelancing, I was just like confused in December 2017. And I met her and she said, listen, I'm working on this performance and it references Zimbabwe in the 80s and it references Thomas Mafumo, but it's like a tribute to Grace Jones in some way, and I want you to do these things. And I explained to her what Future Nostalgia did, and it was nothing like that. And I was like, oh, you want me to do sound for a performance using records and this idea of sound clash, taken from like sound system culture and all of that. And I was like, oh, sounds so great, but I'm not the person for you. I'll find somebody in Cape Town. I know a lot of people. But she was so persistent that I should try. And she said to me something I'll never forget, because I've never forgotten it. But basically, like, the word no doesn't exist in my vocabulary. And I realized that I'd been somebody who'd say no quite a bit, as opposed to like just grabbing something when it's in front. But I just felt like it shouldn't have been me. Anyway, so I tried to do it. We rehearsed for like a week. And what it was really is like setting up turntables and a few other devices. They could be iPads, laptops, phones, anything that can play music, but like set up all at the same time. And so you have speakers all over the room, and each one's connected to a different device, and there's like a delay played between each one. So you have multiple layers of sounds playing at one time, clashing. And I had really no idea what I was doing, but I just did it because we were doing it. And we had a performance to do, and there was going to be a crowd, and you know how I feel about crowds. So anyways, it was a great once-off thing. I was like, I can take off my bucket list that I was in a performance. After watching performances for like 10 years of my life, I can say that I've been in a performance, and it wasn't so bad. Fine, cool. That was like December. I wished her luck. I said it was great. Would be dope to see New York sometime or whatever, but I just said cool and whatever. And some months later, her manager called me the next year saying, we have a performance in Leicester, and Nora wants you to join. And again, this thing of strange South African self-esteem that sometimes is a denialist position, where I was like, no, going overseas with a performance? But also because I work with performers all the time. I know what it takes to do that I was first like saying no, until they said just do it, just come with us. So basically that kickstarted 3 years of traveling with her, with this performance, which is her tribute to Grace Jones being the first black female figure that she looked up to growing up in Zimbabwe. But it works as a trilogy, so ours is a 1 hour piece that forms part of a big 3 hour piece. So that has accounted for a lot of the traveling through like Europe, the US. This was Mali as well. We went there to perform at a festival in January this year. And so because like anything, when you launch it, you have a lot of bookings, and because she's known internationally, she gets booked in a lot of these festivals, and because I'm doing the sound, or for one part of the sound, I've been asked to go. So in this way, it's been a break from journalism, it's been a break from future nostalgia, but it's still working with records and with turntables. And I was very lucky that they asked me at the start, what turntables do you need? And I was like, anyone? What turntables do I need? Is it just up for... So I said, like, if you could get the SL 1200, that would be dope, but I would work with any turntables. They're like, oh, you want the SL 12? Okay, cool. Tick, tick. And so they bought the set that exists in the US. They're like my long lost babies. And every time I see them, I was like, oh, you guys, it's so nice to see you. But it's because like it would be cheaper than renting out per day, so they bought a set, and it's just in the US, and it's just like, wow, it's there. So while I realized that traveling is a privilege, it's really a privilege, and at the same time with journalism and with this dying field of arts journalism, I wouldn't get to travel with that. So when the opportunity came to, do you want to come and learn and do residencies and develop this work so that it can premiere at festivals and stuff, I jumped on it despite it being very out of my comfort zone. But what comes out of that is, if you're somebody who's naturally curious, you'll go out and you look for the record stores, or you look for the cultural places, even if you're alone. And a lot of digging happened in this time, and a lot of rent money and all of that stuff, but you really lose track of time and space in some ways. But that's pretty much why I've not been writing, or where Future Nostalgia took a bit of a dip, because I was never really around. It's literally been 2018 till March this year. And so when lockdown hit, everything just got cancelled. And so with that comes income as well, which means there goes the work that you were relying on this whole time. So while I think a lot of people might have thought that I was traveling because I was like maybe a rich kid with rich parents or something like that, but all of it was for work, and all of it was also in the vein of like, these things don't come around that often, and so you've just got to go check it out for yourself. So what happened with Mali is this thing of not going to any African country but playing all this African music. I asked them for permission if I could go a week before, just by myself. And so I was there for a week alone. It was crazy, but just to see like what does it mean to be somewhere else within the same continent, but just a whole other place. And so that's basically where I've been. I haven't been around. I haven't been on the scene. I haven't been able to organize gigs. I haven't been able to do much writing. I've taken a break from my normal life. But I knew, like everything has a time period, and I know it's going to come to an end. I just didn't think it would come to an end so soon, and that there was going to be a global virus where you can't move in a plane, and you can't travel anywhere. We were supposed to go to Norway in March, and France, and then Chicago. And my personal thing is that if they just made data more affordable, like, I think, I know it sounds weird, but it's like, if you think about who has access to the internet, who has access to information. In Africa, in South Africa, a lot of people access the internet from their phones. But you can find almost anything you want to know about online. So, but the fact that a lot of people can't access it still, like, we live in a world where we think everybody's connected, but we really aren't. Especially with the data costs being so expensive as they are in South Africa. In terms of the education system, it starts from like primary school. The way the whole education needs to be, like the system needs to be reformed. It starts with the curriculum and a rewriting of that curriculum from our own perspective, with our history. Like, why did I learn more about World War I and World War II than I did about anything that would make me feel proud of being South African in my history? So I think the textbooks and the curriculums need to be reworked. All of that stuff needs to change. But I'm not a scholar of education reform, but I do know that education is everything. And reading and empowerment and alternative publications and free access to the internet and free education. Because what's crazy about traveling to places like Finland, which was earlier this year in January after Mali, which was insane. It was insane to go from Mali to Finland. Because you've got one of the world's poorest economies right next to one of the world's most functioning, most favoritist, most cleanest, most healthiest GDP countries in the world, right next to each other, back to back. And you see what the difference is in spirit, in mind, in soul, in the way it works. And there's nothing appealing about Finland on first glance, honestly. There was nothing appealing about it. I was so sad to be there first, because I really wanted to be back in Mali. But then when I started talking about politics and social, like the way social structure works, and how in a social democracy, like, education is free for everybody. And what would happen if we lived in a place where education was accessible to everyone? And I'm talking about like all education. Yeah. Schools, universities, like the literacy rates, but also the level of skills, because they believe this is how it was explained to me, was like that the next big astronaut or whatever could come from this poor little community area. So there's no discrimination. Everybody gets access to the same thing. So it's about valuing your human capital that you have. That's what it is. That's where the social democracy system was explained. So, which is something we don't have at all. We don't have it all. It's only the rich have accessibility to the best education, and everybody else gets left out. And I was doing this research recently, and I mentioned it quite a bit. I was looking at the statistics in South Africa for populations at universities for black communities. And out of a population of like, what's 65 million, roughly, I think, only 1.5 million are black students at universities. So that should, and this is like 2020. So like this thing that we're so progressive and we're so like ahead of, um, like woke and society has changed and all of that only affects this really small percentage of people. Everybody else gets completely left out of the equation completely. And so it's another way about this is where researching apartheid systems has to be like commended. Like apartheid systems were genius systems. They were really, really, really effective and they worked really well and they work really well. So for instance how bunch education and all of that prepped people to settle for like really uh, poor education systems and really weak education systems. It kind of just set the tone. I think what it means is that um, South Africa knows how to keep things in the hands of a few,
Yeah.
right? So just in terms of whoever's running it, just to make things a little bit more accessible. By making it accessible doesn't only relate to data fees, it means finding, like creating places where people can access information or having like Wi-Fi free zones throughout the whole city, like realizing that there's an education gap here, which keeps people like suppressed and oppressed. Yeah, it's just it's you got a group of people and they all come from different backgrounds, but each one gets exactly the same chance because we never know who might be the one with the most brilliant idea. And I think that's the thing we lack.